In this episode, you'll hear the story of Jennie Maizels. Jennie has been a freelance illustrator for 27 years now, and she has worked in the publishing industry, in the textile and education industries. And she has built things such as books, especially she's very well known for her pop-up books. One of those books has actually gotten to number 6 on the bestseller list, right next to Stephen King, which is quite the achievement. And she's also currently selling online courses and art supplies on her website. If you're interested, you'll be able to find all of these episodes, timestamps, and resources, as well as my free guide to full-time freelancing in the description below. Let's begin. Okay, so this is the first episode of the podcast. Today, I'm here with Jennie Maizels. Jennie, once again, as I told you, you are the first guest on the podcast. So a special thanks for you to coming.
For asking me first.
So I would like to start with you telling us about your current situation. What does your life look like right now? Just give us a brief intro.
Sort of snapshot into what I am right now. Well, I have been an illustrator for I'm 50 years of age. So I graduated in 1994 from Central St Martin's, and actually I've never ever stopped. So even with children, I've just been very lucky. I think my sort of main thing that I'm known as such is for illustrating pop-up books. So I'm about to start a new one, and they're really labor intensive. So I used to do one a year, and now it's kind of one every 3 years, because when I'm working on a pop-up book, I can't do anything else. So at the moment, I am about to start another pop-up book, but I think it's interesting that it's great I'm the first, and it's interesting because I think time has changed so much from obviously 1994 to 2021, but this whole journey as an illustrator, it's really interesting to be asked questions, and what my practice is like and what I'm working on, and how best to kind of carve and craft a living out of it. So I don't just do books. I have just also finished a range of fabrics. I had a huge deadline, which I've just finished. So the fabrics have gone off to print. So I also did somebody's logo recently. So it's just a huge plethora of sort of different ways of using my art. I also run an online sort of community called Sketchbook Club, and that takes up a lot of time. And I have a little online shop. So it's 100% full time. Like, it's just, there's not much of a break. But yes, that my sort of day-to-day life is a kind of classic 9 to 5, really. It's and I also do a bit of teaching, not at the moment, but at Southampton University on the illustration pathway of graphic arts. And feel very passionately, as I know you do, Tom, about trying to help young illustrators form a career where they don't have to subsidise their income; they just illustrate. That's their job. So I think that's something we share a passion about.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I guess we can just dive into your story, and I would like to start from your first interactions with illustration, so the learning phase in a way. Then we can move to how you started actually working in the space and how you have successfully made it a full-time job.
Sure. Well, it's a very sort of conventional route. I went to art school and had no doubt about specialising in illustration. And in the first year at Central St Martin's, you have to kind of do a bit of graphic design, and I hated it. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to get my paints out. My parents are both artists, and my mum was an illustrator, and my father a fine artist, and he now runs an art magazine, and they're art collectors. And actually, I was brought up without a TV, so we had a like crazy creative childhood, and my poor children have been subjected to the whole boredom is good thing, which I do think it's true. So I drew all the time. It's like just part of sort of my life. So I think it's quite unusual, very unusual, to be quite so focused. I think I know that about my own. I've got a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old, and my 18-year-old doesn't have a clue what she wants to do, and I tell her that's normal. It's it's not normal to say aged 8 I want to be an illustrator, which is exactly what I used to say. So in terms of my introduction to illustration, it couldn't be more in my blood. I mean, it's so natural to me. And I and then in terms of it was really interesting because Central St Martin's, when I was there, they had quite a hands-off approach in that I don't know whether it's on purpose. We're talking a long time ago, but it was almost as if you're left alone, you'll find your visual voice more successfully. So there really wasn't much guidance, and I actually think it was probably quite good for me because
it worked.
I think it's true because you didn't have anyone saying. So I find sometimes with lecturers that I've worked with, obviously I don't want to say anything to them, but I really can witness them trying to push their own style on students, and I find that I think it's wrong. And I can tell sometimes when I look at degree shows and I think, oh, there's a really assertive lecturer here because they all look like they all look the same, or they all look like that illustration lecturer. So there is something to be said about just being sort of slightly left to grow in your own space and time.
So have you managed to actually develop your own style during the school years?
Yeah, I really think I did. And it's really interesting looking back at really early work. I did an Erasmus exchange, which sadly, thanks to Brexit, is no more. But I went to Barcelona it was meant to be 3 months, but I loved it so much I stayed for 5. And we sort of rocked up at the art school in Barcelona. And there'd been some kind of mix-up, and we'd been put on the technical illustration degree. So we went in this room and we were all given a carburettor, which is a complicated piece of car to draw, and a really sort of sharp pencil, and lots of kind of people on kind of clinical desks. And we were just sort of like, this is not where we want to be. So we never went back. And actually for 5 months, I just drew, and I think I was much more prolific if I'd actually been at university. And I think in that time, I really, really found my kind of, that phrase, visual voice. But it really is how I still illustrate. It hasn't changed very much at all. I've always been really fascinated. And also, I just really like the craft of hand lettering. So that's been a big part of my work. And I kept a visual diary when I was in Barcelona. And I still keep these slightly obsessive visual diaries all these years later. And I think that's really interesting because, there was I aged 20, and 30 years later, I'm still pretty much doing the same thing. So it's something I really try and get my students to do. It's really hard, but just to try and switch off from all the distractions of, look at that person's work over there, or that's beautiful, and just have some space to grow in your own style, in your own time. It's easier said than done, but some time away is quite good when you are trying to sort of hone that really strong identity.
Absolutely. Okay, so you've gone through your formal art journey, and then how did you start to approach the professional side of illustration?
Such a different time, isn't it? Strange now, because I feel like it's embarrassing to say there was no internet, but there genuinely wasn't. It hadn't really been invented. And in fact, I remember when I'm jumping ahead here, but when I got an agent and I went to one of her parties, and there was this funny little dweeb running around telling everyone about the internet and we should all invest in it. And we were just like, who's that loser? And should have listened to him. But that was a bit of a lucky break. So in the old days, it was I guess I was quite ambitious. I am still quite ambitious, and I did like a little postcard. Well, my degree show was mad ambitious because I thought, okay, so you've got these 3 walls and people were kind of framing things. I thought I want to do something a bit more dramatic so that I get really noticed. And I'm quite an obsessive person. I quite like massive, daunting projects, which is why maybe I quite like these enormous pop-up books I produce. And so I decided with these 3 walls that I was going to make like a replica paper mache Alice in Wonderland's tea party. So I had the kind of like as if they were deer heads of trophies of all the characters on the walls and this big table and cards kind of flying in the air. And it took me months, loads of all-nighters, literally, it was ridiculous. But then from that, I got, I was it was still up in, in the show, the degree show was still on. I did the front windows for Harvey Nichols for London Fashion Week, because it was quite a sort of display.
Okay.
And then that was a bit of a lucky break.
Let me stop you for a second, because
yes,
we've kind of glissed.
I know we've done that. Yeah.
We're going a bit back.
I did say I do that. I'm terrible at whizzing off in mad directions.
That's
so
no problem.
Do rein me in.
So this product that you had realized, you have then used to have you sent it to publishers? How does that connect to you doing the other?
The theatrical degree show took a long time to do, and I took pictures. I'm looking up because they're still up there. They're on my wall of the main part, which is a window and a whole scene through this window. And I took a picture of that and made it into a postcard. And I sent it to like 1 million people. I mean, I literally sent it to 1 million people. And then, because I'm quite pushy and as I said, ambitious, I then followed all of them up with phone calls and asking them to come to the degree show. And yeah, I think that it was all at that time where you're preparing yourself to leave university, and I knew I didn't want to do an MA. It was just I just want to work, and that mail out, got me a lot of work and contacts. But also, I do think the actual show, and I try and tell my students this as well, is your massive chance of being seen. And I think I'm right in saying that most unis, even if you like Leeds or Edinburgh, have a London show as well. I think they do. And so what other opportunity will there be where you're going to get the art directors and commissioners and editors visiting and seeing your work? So try and just massively stand out. It's your chance to show off. And I think it worked with me. I got that.
So what kind of response are we talking about? You sent these 1 million postcards, and could you estimate a percentage of people that go back to you?
So I think probably, I mean, I did do a lot of trailing around my portfolio, a lot. I just remember just carting that portfolio around for weeks. So I mean, maybe like 40% of people got back to me. And there wasn't, it's mad, isn't it? There wasn't even email. So it was all phones and postcards. And then, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but then I got invited to go, whilst the Harvey Nichols window thing was up and finished, I got invited for this. I thought it was a portfolio viewing at the Body Shop. And I remember going, and I had pigtails and clogs, and clogs were quite fashionable then, or maybe they weren't, I was just wearing clogs. And I had like a sort of ripped denim skirt. It was really scruffy. And I remember sitting in the corridor at the Body Shop headquarters, and all these people in suits, and thinking, oh, there must be something else, some other interview on today. And then I went into this room and there was like Anita Roddick and the board of directors, this massive table with like loads of people. And I still didn't twig and just thought, oh, they really take viewing students' portfolios. But actually what had happened was they'd come to my degree show, seen this ridiculous amount of effort I put into it. And actually what they had done and hadn't communicated it properly, invite me to an interview for a full-time job. So I got the job and thought, well, I should really take it because I need money. So I worked there for about 3 months, but then in that time, all the people who I had called were still asking me to come back with portfolios, and I was kind of doing it in the evenings. And I just thought, I don't want this. I want to be an illustrator. So I left. But it was quite a mad turn of events at the beginning of my when I just left college. So yeah, I think that's quite a good. I don't know whether it's a tip, but for people who are about to graduate, it's that make as big a splash and noise as you can at your degree show, I think.
How important do you think formal education is for illustrators?
I think it's important in that it's the time to allow yourself to create your own brand, really, because that's what we're doing. I think we're creating a visual identity, and it's really important that it's unique to you and it's strong. And I don't know. I think having some guidance with good lecturers, and just finding things like I run a color palette workshop because I think having a really strong color palette as part of your sort of brand identity is really, really important. And just having that sort of guide. And I do like a face workshop. It's like, well, how as an illustrator, how do you draw faces? That's really important. Like you might just do side views, or you might not draw any eyes, or what is your kind of unique way of portraying faces. And I think if you have a lecturer who's questioning and pushing you to find your true self as an illustrator, then I think it's massively valuable. But I think you have to be lucky, because sometimes, as I've said, you might get those. I was a bit naughty as a lecturer, because sometimes I'd be sort of saying, well, I'm not sure if you should listen to that advice from my really nice colleague. But I think it's really important to be strong, and not just if someone has a really strong style and is trying to push their style on you, as a student, you do have to be strong. But at the same time, would you question it? Would you grow? And would you be guided so much if you were just independently finding your own? It depends on the person, I suppose. But I found the time. I mean, I know I said we were left quite alone, and I went off on my own to Barcelona, but it's still a degree, and having that experience as well. I mean, I would not want to miss going to art school. I mean, it's like the best fun ever and just fabulous. So I would say, just as in terms of your own growth, I would put quite a lot of, I would say it's quite vital. It's expensive, especially in the UK, but it's very expensive.
So would you suggest for people that they should actually, if they right now they realize they want to go into illustration, but they haven't gone to art school, would you suggest them just go?
It depends how old they are. I think. I think if you're 18 and you just finished your A levels, then absolutely. I mean, it's such a golden time. It's such a special time of your own personal development. And living away from home and being a student is very different, and it's a real rite of passage. However, if you're in your 30s and you're thinking of a career change, is it worth it? I would say it's probably a better investment maybe to go on lots of smaller courses rather than invest in a whole, because it's so expensive. It's like 20 grand a year, for 3. It's a lot of money to invest, and if it's not in your realm and it's not in your financial ability, then it might not be worth it if you're slightly older. So I would say it depends on where you are in your life, I think.
Makes sense. Okay, so please go on with your story. So you've had this this experience, you decided that wasn't for you.
Yes, the weird body shop experience. But it was really weird timing, because then because it was really well paid, and it's like, oh, I sound really horrible and smug. Everyone's like, oh gosh, she's awful, smug person. But it was a different time, and illustrators were paid more, I think, as well. But so I had a little bit of money saved up, I suppose, from that full-time job, and then I met the wonderful Kate Petty. So I was very lucky. So I was spotted again that degree show with the crazy Alice in Wonderland. A literary agent spotted my work and asked me to come and see her, even though there wasn't really anything children's book like. I mean, it was paper mache, and I did have my portfolio there. And she set me a whole load of tasks. So she gave me lots of projects, and then I then had a presentable children's illustration portfolio addition to my portfolio, which I didn't really have. So then she introduced me to somebody called Kate Petty, and she was a real educationalist, and she was an editor at the Random House. And we got on really well, like crazy, like never before felt creative energy between us. It was a mad chemistry. And she had an idea to write a book called The Great Grammar Book. I should have props, but it's the yellow one there. No one had done anything educational. So this was 96 or 95, 96. No one had done anything educational that was pop-up ever. So that pop-up books were Jan Pianowski, kind of The Haunted House, or that kind of, it was fun. And I mean, that was my favorite book as a child. And so no one had done this as a way of getting children to, which is a known educational kind of method of playing, and by playing they're learning. And of course, the pop-up book lends itself so well. So for instance, you have a preposition, and which is the under and over words in grammar. And so you have like a little dog on a piece of string and a pop-up scene, and you take the dog through the gate and under the stile and in, and it gets in there. And it's something weird happened in that everyone bought it. It's still my best ever selling book, and it was number 6 next to Stephen King in the bestseller list. It was crazy.
Wow, that's impressive.
It was that was impressive. And in fact, you know what, most careers go like that. It was like super amazing. I remember, we had all these kind of mad book tours because it was such a big seller. So we did the Dublin Literary Festival. We were like there with Roddy Doyle and all these legends, because we were the only children's on there, because children's books don't normally do that well. So the grammar book was an insane launching platform, because it was quite a famous book. Anyway, Kate and I, that's it for years. That's what I did. I just produced book after book after book. So we did the Terrific Times Tables book, a How to Read Music book, a science book, and they all did really, really, really well.
The process was she always came to you with an idea that she wanted to realize. And
it was more than that. It was a real partnership. We lived near each other. She's older than me. She died in 2007. So there's a sad element to this story. And so it would have been her 70th birthday recently. So she was 20 years older than me. And I don't know. We lived near each other. We just lived in each other's houses. And sometimes I would say, oh, why don't we do this next? Or, and she would say, I think the illustration should look like this, or do a little scribble. So it was an unusual writer-illustrator relationship, because normally it's quite distant, and you're presented with a text, and you then present your ideas. But we worked very much together, and sometimes I'd be drawing in front of her to plan out how things would work. Also, it was such a madly different time in publishing, so we didn't even have an art editor. you just they're quite bonkers. The books, looking back at them now, they're quite feral. They're really like I find them quite difficult to look at because I feel I'm a bit more polished now, but they're really like nuts because we just like handed it over. Like we finished, and now everything. There are rules about hierarchy of font. You know what I mean? It has to, all header text has to be a certain font size, or the spacing, or there was none of that. It was all hand lettered as well. All the books were hand lettered. And they were translated into every single language. And then they made my hand lettering into a font, so they could then. So some font person worked with me on making, which at the time was like groundbreakingly technical.
Imagine.
So how many books? Oh my gosh, we did maybe 15 big pop-up books together. And it was just like literally when one was in production, I'd be working on the next one. Or
how many years did this go on for?
Till she died, I guess, till about 2000, when she died of cancer. So when she started to get ill, maybe 2006, I think it went on to, and we produced a lot of books. I'm really bad at remembering. It's like 15 or 16. But each one would take a kind of year because they're quite, pop-up books. I mean, there's so much artwork in them because, of course, you've got, things that pull out and under things, and you're at the back because you could see things on the back, or So yes, a long time. I did other things as well, every now and in between, but nothing hugely significant because they were so time consuming.
So I'm guessing you were able to make a living off of it right from the get-go, didn't you?
I know. Well, do you know what? The first royalty check from that great grammar book, and I don't mind. I remember you did ask me beforehand. How do you feel about? This is how I think. This is how different times are. So, in fact, I just met my husband. I think he thought he'd really lucked out, this rich person, and then it went really downhill from there. But my first royalty check ever was £20,000, and I was only 25, I think. It was just insane, and I don't think that wouldn't happen now. I don't think it would happen now, because also don't forget. I remember I lived in Islington in North London, and I remember walking down Upper Street and seeing 4 children holding my book because they didn't have phones. They didn't have Xboxes, or I think books, and the fact that it was so interactive, the pop-up book. I think that's why it hit something in the zeitgeist of parents wanting their kids to, speak better grammar or write better grammar. And it was a fun book and kids liked it. And Kate was clever. It was her idea. Kate was really clever and very creative. And so as on the strength of that, she left publishing and became a full-time writer. So she and I then just realized we were onto something, and that it would be silly not to create a really big series on every single subject in the curriculum, which is pretty much what we did. So I was making it. I didn't have a royalty for 20 grand on all the other books. It was only that one. But with books, it's I don't know if it's helpful for it. I'm sure everyone knows how they work, but if it's helpful to explain the structure of payment, if that's helpful.
Yes, please. Let's talk about
it. With a book, you are given sometimes you're given a development fee. I always ask for a development fee. So whilst you're working on the speculative idea for a publisher, and that development fee is non-returnable. So that's yours, and it's just a kind of bread and butter whilst you're working on it. Then when you go to contract, you get an advance, and it's normally split into 3. So you have a payment on signature, and a payment on delivery of artwork, and a payment on publication. And that's your sort of core salary. And then when you've earned back your royalty, and this is the same with even, celebrity autobiographies, you always pay back. People go, what do you mean pay back? But it just means you have to earn that amount of royalty that you were given in advance before you start earning money. But if the book pans, doesn't matter, you keep your advance, the publisher loses out. So it's quite, I think it's quite a fair way of doing things. And then you just have to hope that it does well and that you get a royalty. So you get a royalty twice a year, so April and October, and a statement telling you how many copies and how many overseas copies, or it's quite an involved piece of literature, it's like that big. So it's yeah, I mean, I survived happily many years on that. It was a comfortable salary, yeah.
Okay. And so a very big chunk of your career has been on
Huge.
this project. Yeah. And so how did you branch out into doing other things later?
Well, I mean, I think Kate and I maybe would have carried on, actually. It was a very comfortable, and I really loved doing them, and I loved the joy it gave to children. And then the last book we worked on together, she said she would quite like her son to be involved in the next book, which was the pop-up body book, which lent itself really well. So and so that was the last book I did partnered with anyone. And then I was walking along a beach one day in England and thinking, this is so English, this beach. And I remember thinking, has there ever been a pop-up book about England? Like I had this kind of in my head. This was, yeah, maybe 2009, maybe 10. And I had immediately an image of a Union Jack cover and yeah, a pop-up book. And so I went to Walker Books, who had published the pop-up body book, and just told them about the idea. And she said to me, I think you'll have to wait until 2012 because of the Olympics. So I then thought, well, I think it should be London. I think we need to make it pop up London. And so that's my next. So it was like, how many years later that I got another bestseller? I waited all that time. So I've got it. It's like, it's there. That's Pop Up London. Yeah. That's one prop I managed to grab. And so that book was another big seller for me, a really big seller. Partly because it was the year of, you know, the Olympics. It was published, and it was the in England, it was the Queen's Jubilee. And again, it was one of those books that were just everywhere and in all the tourist, you know, shops and galleries and things like that. And so I wrote that because I feel like I'd learned a lot from Kate and I felt comfortable writing it. And then from there, I've written all of them, my own things. So in terms of my sort of book journey, I then went on and did a pop-up New York book. And I'm going quite far ahead now, so you know, I'll rein it back in so I don't just go off on a tangent. But I think about the same time as London, I also did a range of fabrics for a big upholsterers, and I thought of the idea of a London fabric. No one was doing anything London. There was nothing like now it's everywhere. So It was like the first London fabric. And it was in like Liberties and John Lewis, and it was quite a sort of, you know, I now see copies of it everywhere. It doesn't really matter. In fact, look, I'm sitting on it. And a chair is on it. And then at the same time, I had this idea, and there's something I tell my students is to try and be quite entrepreneurial about your business, your practice. And I thought about my kids who were quite young. And I was thinking, I can't sew at all. I really can't sew. And I was thinking it'd be really lovely if you could buy some nice things to like just iron onto their clothes that are pretty. And everything was just boring. And so I just, see, I've got them here. Look, so they're like little patches that you just iron onto clothes. And suddenly that became quite a big thing. And to cut a long story short, it actually became too much. It was suddenly, well, it was like running a, I didn't really enjoy it. It was sort of, I had you know, I'm really not a business woman, and we had to go to the trade shows and employ an office manager and sales, and it was just, it came to a point where I just thought, it's really horrible.
Yeah. So how did you go about selling those in the beginning?
So we got some samples made. And then I think it's interesting because I've never stopped being that kind of student who phones and sends things. And I did exactly that. I sent them to Liberties and John Lewis, and amazingly, they said yes. And my first two stockists were Liberties and John Lewis. And then thereafter, I was able to go, well, you might like these. They are in Liberties and John Lewis. And then people would say, oh, okay, then yeah, we'll stock them. And also because the London book was in all the galleries, I was able to say, well, you stock my London book, you might like to stock my patches. And so they were in all the London galleries. And yeah, then there was this big range. We did little alphabet patches, and yeah, it was a bit bananas. And then it just came to a point where I just suddenly thought, I'm on the wrong path. This isn't, I think it was because I was going to do another pop-up book, which I'll come on to, and the last big pop-up book I did. And I just realized that I can't do another pop-up book because I haven't got the time. And actually that feels like it's where my heart is a bit. So I stopped doing the patches, and we still sell them a bit because we've still got a bit of stock. But I'm glad I moved away from it.
Yeah, it's important to kind of figure out as you go what your direction is, because clearly there are so many things that you could be doing at every moment. So just understanding yourself and actually choosing a path for yourself is such a big part, in my opinion.
It is. And I think I tell this to my students a lot about, I think it's, and I think this is quite important. I think it's really important to not wait for work to come to you. I know that's really obvious, but I think people kind of think that I've sent all these emails out, or I've sent the link to my portfolio out, and I've had nothing back. And you sort of think, whilst you're waiting, set up an Etsy shop and just sell stuff. I mean, I get my students like, oh, that's a beautiful image you've created. Just put it on a tea towel and put it on Etsy. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm actually selling stuff. Well, of course you are. It's beautiful. And I think people just love artisan homespun products, and good products are quite hard, quite, really lovely images. Just it's quite cheap and easy to anywhere that does those really, the places where grandparents go to get cushions with their grandchildren's faces on, or mugs, or I mean, you can just get one-offs and just be entrepreneurial. Don't wait for work. Sell your wares. And that's something I really think is important as illustrators. Is don't just think, I must get a book deal, or I would love some more editorial, or you can do all of that searching and seeking, and whilst you're waiting, just create and just try and get some income in from your beautiful work, I think. And it's completely possible. And even if Etsy's really easy to set up, or just set up your own e-commerce shop, or just try and think about what your work would look good on, whether it's a mug or a patch, anything that you think would, a pin, things that are very, very low investment, basically.
Yeah.
Not like you have to order 500 of them or anything. And things like, there are loads of really good websites, aren't there, where you can just get 10 postcards, or things that you don't spend lots of money, because then your margins will be better. You'll get you don't have all this kind of huge investment. But that's quite important, I think, as illustrators, is to try and make your own money.
For sure. Although I think that as we go on, doing this becomes harder and harder to do, just because of the amount of competition of people who are actually trying to do the same thing that you do. But I feel like there are two big lessons from the things you've talked about until now. One is definitely the importance of initiating, being the one who actually is proactive and goes after what he or she wants. instead of just waiting for things to come. And it sounds like an obvious thing, but I believe there are many people who actually don't implement it, to actually get up and go and make that call and propose that idea to the right people. So that's definitely one thing. And the other thing is, so many times you've been very good at filling a void. So proposing something that wasn't there yet. And once again, in different times in the story you've told, we can see you spotting, oh, there is this thing missing. There is nothing about London. There is a lack of a way for people who can't sew but would like to decorate, and this is connected to actually initiating the thing. And it's so important to innovate in order to stand out. Going back to the other thing you talked about, to stand out and actually create something that people will love to adopt, and talk about, possibly. So
yeah, that's true. But then I think sometimes that innovation can be your style as well. I mean, so I've had a few students actually where you just are blown away by their style. You think, I have not seen anything like that before, and you think, whatever you put that on, people will
buy it.
Want it. Or so I completely agree. But it's I mean, I had the benefit of it being a different time, and yes, but and then I guess the other side is the workshops and teaching, and that's also something I think. Something I also want to talk about is marketing as well. But I think in sort of tandem to that, I think that people just love being taught how to do what you do, or just sort of copying you, or so I tell my students, just if you're going to do a painting, set up a time lapse and just put it on Instagram, because people just love things like that. And I mean, if you're okay chatting to camera, or you're confident enough, then set up a YouTube channel and just show people how to do your work, or because that's been really powerful for me, I think. And also, I just cannot stress this enough, but it's all about Instagram. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. I would say, apart from my books, I probably get about 70% of my commissions from Instagram. And I run like Instagram workshops with my students. So just make the pictures just beautiful. Just spend hours on them. It doesn't matter. It will pay off. Like, I mean, I faff around for days on my pictures. So if you're an illustrator and you're doing a work in progress, then don't just take a quick snap. Like, really compose it and make your feed as pretty as possible. And it will come to fruition. It's so incredible, Instagram, and knowing how to use hashtags and following the right people. And there's loads of really good tricks I tell my students. So we do like a little packaging drawing day. This is a really good tip, actually. So we do like a packaging drawing day where we draw, like, I don't know, Marmite, or these lovely English packaging, Tunnocks tea cakes, which have got the most beautiful vintage packaging. And there's like jam labels. And we do this. And then we tag them in our Instagram, and they always repost them. And then all the followers come rushing in because they think, oh gosh, look at that lovely illustrator's work. And so that's a really good it's a good way of, because then the brand who you've drawn, I mean, that sort of suits maybe my style. So kind of, I've got a tin of pencils or something like that. We might draw something like that, and then that company will love that drawing and put it on their feed with 100,000 followers, and then they will come in. So just trying to find ways of growing your audience, I think. But yeah, for me, I think Instagram is the new portfolio, actually. So I do that with illustrators. I just look at their Instagram, and I check out their feed, and I can see their their brand or identity that they've created, and I can't stress how powerful it is as a way of getting work, as a way of boosting your income.
What kind of following do you have right now on Instagram? Do you know?
I think I do. I think it's, what is it, 12.6 thousand.
Okay.
It's not like massive. I know that that's not that big. I mean, I know a lot of illustrators are like 400,000, so it's not, but it's enough to have an audience whereby you get offers of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway, that you don't need those massive, millions of followers in order to and actually,
people
sometimes do think that
it dilutes the authenticity as well. If somebody has 1 million followers, I think I read a really interesting article about micro influencers and how they were more fruitful for big brands, and so big brands are now approaching someone like me, who would be a micro influencer, as opposed to the Kardashians, because our
same target.
Because our audiences are more engaged with us, and will I mean, I don't do much. I mean, I do get to ask, will you, I don't know, can we send you this? And the only things I would say yes to is, supporting other artists, or genuinely exciting product that I think, actually, I really want to help you. That's fabulous. And then they always feed back and say, oh, that's interesting. We sent it to all these famous people, and it's the little guys like you where we get the most sales from, because I feel like I'm friends with my followers, and kind of chat. I've never met them, but
yeah,
I'm friends. Yeah.
And how long did it take you to actually start to see results from Instagram?
Oh, that's a good question. I think maybe because I've been on Instagram for about 10 years, I think. And I imagine that it was probably after, because it's quite new. When I started on Instagram, it was quite new. But still, it was quite quick, because I guess, I don't know, my followers were of the same ilk, maybe after about 3 years. But I think I've seen some of my students grow super fast, like because they've managed to, have things reposted, or do you know what I mean? I think that I've seen things like that happen.
Yeah, definitely. If you follow your advice of using other people's audiences, that's definitely a great boost.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're good at, I told one student, sorry, I suddenly thought this idea that I have to share, who really good, amazing at portraiture, but kind of illustrative. So not, traditional, but the likeliness was good, but there was something quite whimsical. There was something quite special about them. And so I just said, oh my gosh, just tag away. And he got some real traction, because, who's not going to repost a fantastic illustration of themselves? I mean, it's just, yeah, like fandom, isn't it? It's sort of, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we kind of went a bit into marketing and lost the story bit. Do you maybe want to go back to the story? And because there's a lot of things that you, as you said, you do, and we've seen a few. Where did you go from there?
So I think that one of the big things I do is the online courses, and I think I've always felt that nobody draws for fun, and this is nothing really to do with illustration. This is just people having some mindful time to themselves and drawing. And I think I'd have this belief that we're just teaching it wrong to people. And I'm talking about people who might knit or bake, or they wouldn't draw. So what I do is I give them everything they need, and there is no way they can go wrong. So, for instance, I might give them like a whale, and actually, if you are somebody who's never drawn, to draw a whale, it will probably look a bit like a child's drawing, and it will probably sort of self-perpetuate their belief that they can't draw. It kind of vindicates them. I told you I couldn't draw. So what we do is that we draw over my drawing of a whale, and we scribble over the back a bit like a map in geography when you were a child. And then you've got a whale that doesn't look like a child's drawing. And then with YouTube tutorials, I will then say, fill the whale with water, just fill it with water. And then using watercolor, just dab in colors and watch them merge. And suddenly they've created, and then at the end we kind of squidge pastel down for sort of sunbeams through the water, and it's literally just step by step by step, but it's their creation. It's not paint by numbers or anything, and it's empowering because at the end you really like it. Like, I don't really buy into that belief that it doesn't matter what it looks like. I think it massively matters. Like, you wouldn't, I don't know, like cook something and say it's just all about the lovely task of cooking, and it doesn't matter what it tastes like. It massively matters. And I think you can feel a bit flat if you've, tried to create something and it's just a bit rubbish, but you're told, oh, it's fine, it's all about the process. I don't think it is, actually. I think
the problem is I think it's great to focus on the process because the outcome is important. So
exactly.
If you focus on
the process is important. I'm not saying it isn't, but I don't think it's so important that the end result doesn't matter.
No, absolutely. The end results matters for sure.
Yeah. So that's what Sketchbook Club is. So it is, and it's there's no subscription, so people can and they're really cheap. And this isn't for illustrators. I'm not selling. I'm just explaining it. They're like £4. So if if you're someone who makes cards out of kits, or do you know what I mean? Like this, like naff little card kits with kind of spongy flowers, or that sort of thing. But this way, you're creating something that you might want to frame, and you've used watercolors and color pencils, and you've learned the difference between acrylic and gouache, and what a size 1 paintbrush does, or how to use pastels, or a calligraphy, or people have, if they've done a lot of them, suddenly think, I can kind of do it by myself now. It's really interesting. And so that has quite a big following. So I have quite a lot of people taking part in that. During the pandemic, in the first lockdown, I gave them away for free, and it was really amazing how much they helped people. It was really lovely. So it was a bit of a full-time job, because I said, email me the one you want to do. And so I don't know why I did that, because then I was like on the email for like days, and it kept me busy in the first lockdown. It was, and I'm actually trying, with the help of my husband, to turn it into a social enterprise, so that, because it was so beneficial for people at a very stressful time, and it helped people so much because of that whole, but not only the kind of the sort of zeitgeist of mindfulness, but also the fact that you ended up with something really beautiful. I think that's what's quite different. So what we'd like to do, we did have meetings, and then second wave, third wave, and now it's not happening. And with NHS work with kind of directors who were interested in maybe kind of making it something that you could get from the doctors. So that's another thing I'm working on, is to try and spread the word about how beneficial it is, and that would be really nice to get going. I suffer a bit from having too many tears, and and then slightly spinning plates, but anyway, yeah.
So when did you start with the courses? Is this a recent thing?
No, it was about 7 years ago. But I think it started to really take off about 3.5 years ago. Yeah, we had a big article in the Guardian newspaper and online. So they came to one of my days, because I do all day events, and people come, from further afield because it's all day and stay in hotels. And then I do a kind of monthly evening one. And so the Guardian came to an all day one. And then from that, really, that was the kind of, bit of a rocket boost in terms of usage and people getting to know about it. But,
That's
and that
very
was through
interesting.
Instagram.
How did you go about, being featured into the Guardian?
Instagram.
Okay, so you've been
Yeah.
contacted.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So the journalist followed me on Instagram, and then she came along with a photographer. Yeah. So.
That's awesome. Okay, so 7 years. What percentage could you say of your income that comes from online courses?
From Sketchbook Club. Well, it's not that well. It's okay, but I think I'm a larger majority comes from my online art shop. So there's another kind of belief is that art materials, I think as well, it's all about empress new clothing. I don't know if you agree, but I mean, so without meaning to rubbish someone like Winsor & Newton, but I've got a Winsor & Newton watercolor set. I think it was given to me, but it was probably about £40. And the ones that I sell and I use are like £6.99, and they're better. They're honestly better. Honestly, they are. The pigment is stronger, and they react better with each other. And things like paintbrushes. I have synthetic brushes, which I think it's like £1.99 for 2 or something. I really think that my kind of other passion is to try and make it really accessible, and just the frightening sight of a huge bank of paintbrushes in an art shop is enough to put anyone off, isn't it? You sort of think, I don't know the difference. That one's £50, and then actually the ones I use, professionally are £1.99, and they're really good. So I think I probably get about. I would say maybe like 30% of my income is from the online shop, and maybe I would say between 10 and 20 from the actual courses, and then the rest from commissions and books, and also I do public speaking, which is quite useful. That can be quite well paid, where I give kind of talks about creativity because of Sketchbook Club, or color sometimes. And occasionally illustration, but that's when you get old like me. you feel you've got enough experience maybe to talk to people, and as you can tell, you can't shut me up. So
okay, that's fantastic. Okay, so you so this is another thing, you started teaching. Oh yeah, there is the teaching in the university as well. So is that something that came after that?
I used to teach. No, I taught really early on, actually, and that's a really useful thing for graduates. If you, I think I started to. We have some really young lecturers with us at Southampton University who've only graduated like a couple of years ago, and in a way that's quite good because they've got a really fresh relationship with the students, and not so old-fashioned like me. But I think I started teaching. Maybe I'd been out of art school for only maybe like 18 months, and I got a job in Watford on the foundation course, just a day a week, and that's an absolutely brilliant way of subbing income, because it's I mean, now this is going to sound really awful. I don't think it's that well paid, but when I was 25, I thought it was brilliant. Yeah. So then I did, and then I had children, and I kind of thought I didn't need to sub my income that much, and if I did have spare time, I'd rather spend it with them. So I stopped, and then I started teaching again a couple of years ago, and I really want to continue. And as I said, I think visiting lecturers have been stopped because I think, sadly, unis are in a bit of a state at the moment because of the pandemic, and they've lost a lot of international students who pay a lot towards the universities. But but I'm super keen to get back to it because I really like it.
Yeah. And so have we reached the present moment with your story?
We have. I think
We
we
have.
have. Yeah.
Okay.
We're right here. Yeah.
Fantastic. So just if we wanted to recap very, very quickly, if you had to take, the biggest gems that you think people should get from your experience, what would you say? What's your advice?
I think definitely make your own money. We talked about trying to productize, which is a dreadful word, but try to make your own money by selling your wares, and 100% polish your Instagram. Really, really make it slick and desirable to follow you, and and not just. I think people like to, it's like that whole meet the maker thing. I'm because I'm really self-conscious, like I'm an old lady now, and I don't really like having pictures of myself, but actually people quite like to see who the artist is and the artist at work. And if you're, a young illustrator, then it's not just about your work and your work in progress, what your studio looks like, things you like as well, because I think kind of grow a following, grow a kind of little fan base, which you will, because you're all talented. So
I have to make a disclaimer here, though, because yes, it's very important to be able to connect, the brand with the person who's actually behind the brand. But please don't just keep posting selfies and
don't do that.
Moderation is key as well.
Well, that's like that. Well, I can't bear it, and I'm lucky that my children can't bear it either, because having teenage girls, I would hate that. But it's not really selfies. It's more sort of maybe if you're in really interesting things like podcasts, or interview other illustrators, or just sort of be engaging, and so people know who you are. I think, So I think they would be the two most powerful things. Would be those two: is that go sell your work and work on your Instagram portfolio, because it's kind of what it is.
Okay, so we've reached, I'd say, the end of the interview. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, what's next for you, first of all?
What's next is, I can't tell you what my next pop-up book is. I'm massively excited about it. Isn't that annoying? I hate it when people do that, but I'm really excited about it. And I'm starting that soon. And I'm also doing a book about my holiday journals, I think, as a kind of artist's book, and another range of fabrics. So keeping me busy, and then hopefully back to teaching as well. But we have to wait for the unis to get back on their feet a bit, I think.
Once again, you've got a lot on your plate. Well, what are your biggest challenges right now? Would you?
Having too much.
Okay. So that it's a constant challenge.
It's I'm really lucky. So my lovely husband, married for 23 years. He's really different to me. He's really, really calm and structured. And this sounds ridiculous, but he does all my scheduling for me, because I'm so bad. And I say yes to everything. And he's Mr. Spreadsheet. He's really organized. And so before I say yes to anything, we sit down and work out, can you actually do that? Can you? Because otherwise I'd probably just not sleep, or just work and work and work and work. I mean, I think probably a bit of a workaholic, if that's a thing as an illustrator, like, because I love it, but I'm sure you are too. It's just we love what we do, but I think my biggest challenge is trying to fit it all in. It's easier now my children are grown up. They don't need me so much.
So what would you say to other people who might have the same problem? Just find a husband with a very schematic.
Find a life partner who's good at spreadsheets.
Actionable advice. Actionable.
That's the gem, the one gem. Find
a good husband.
But I think if someone's in the same position, Oh, it's really. I think it's important to learn to say no as well. I do often say yes to things I don't actually want to do as well, like favors of people, or I'm terrible like that. You know, like friend who sets up a business, or can you do my logo, or can you do this picture? And I'm just going, yeah, and then think, oh no. So I would, I would not that I'm preaching what I'm, not that I'm practicing what I'm preaching, but I would say, I try and say no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice for sure. Fantastic. And lastly, if people want to get in touch with you, or buy your courses or the art supply that you make, where might they?
No, that's really important, because as we said at the beginning, I am really passionate about helping illustrators. So my inbox is always open for up and coming illustrators, or if they want any advice. So my email's on my website. It's jenniemaizels.com, Jennie, IEMAIZELS. And there's a, everything's on that website, the course and the art shop and everything. And Instagram is the same, Jennie Maizels. And I always follow illustrators back too, because we're all in it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean it about reaching out to people want any further advice or anything.
Fantastic. So you'll be able to get the links that Jennie has just talked about in the podcast note page. And that is it. Once again, Jennie, thank you so much for coming to the podcast and sharing your experience with us. And
it's an absolute pleasure. And thank you for honouring me as the very first guest. So thank you.
We've done it. First episode. Check. Thanks again so much. And I'll talk to you soon. All right, it's done. Thanks for watching. Once again, you'll be able to find all of the timestamps and resources in the link in the description down below. And if you're a struggling freelancer, just go and check out my free guide to full-time freelancing. It might help. I think it will. And other than that, the usual stuff. If you liked the video, please leave a like. And if you'd like to hear more stories like these and more advice on making a living doing what you love, just subscribe to the channel, because there's more coming. Hit the bell, all that stuff. You know what to do. See ya.